Okay, so today I'm joined by Frédéric Fernandes. He's product manager for functional proteins at BENEO. Frédéric works closely with customers to develop innovative applications and bring new plant-based ingredients to market. So today we'll be exploring the latest consumer trends, the most promising market opportunities, and why fava bean is emerging as a key player in plant-based protein. First, though, let's get to know a bit more about his role and how he came to work in this space. So, Frédéric, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Hello, Nick. Thank you. I'm happy to be here as well. Yeah,
Let,
so indeed.
let's
um,
start with a bit about you. What's your role at BENEO and what first drew you to the world of plant-based protein?
I'm started at BENEO working in 2022, so I'm 3 years at the company now. Um, and in general, I have a background in agriculture engineering, and so I was always drawn to everything related to agriculture, also to food science. And of course, with BENEO, it's I would say a nice mix, because they were looking for a new role as product manager for their plant-based protein focus. So it was actually a great fit, certainly because they focus on fava. And sustainability and innovation is something that always was very interesting to me. So it was actually a great fit for me to start in this position.
Mhm. And for those who might not know, can you give us a quick overview of BENEO's work in the alternative protein sector?
Yeah. So BENEO is actually focused on producing all kinds of plant-based ingredients. So we actually process all kinds of plant sources, like rice, like sugar beets, like chicory, and recently also fava bean, and we get all kinds of plant-based ingredients out of it. And talking about starches, talking about sugars, and now also proteins. So plant-based is really embedded in BENEO's DNA, I would say. Recently, we also invested and finished building of fava bean protein concentrate plant, which opened earlier this year. And in 2022, we also did an acquisition from Meatless, which is actually a company that focuses on plant-based textured and semi-finished products. So we are actually having a little large part of the supply chain in hand as we speak today.
Mhm. So now that we've got a sense of your role and BENEO's position in the market, let's look at the bigger picture. Consumer expectations for plant-based foods have been shifting quickly, with new priorities emerging alongside the traditional ones. So what shifts are you seeing consumer expectations around plant-based proteins right now? What's changed most in the past year or two, would you say?
Yeah. I think one thing that clearly changes is that the expectancy from consumers is really on having great taste and great texture. These are really important. It's not sufficient anymore for the consumer to be only plant-based and to put clean label, plant-based, naturally sourced on your products. They really want the products to also deliver taste and texture. And of course, the competition in the field is also increasing much more. So it's very important for producers to really stand out of the crowd with regards to the expectancy of customers. And also, next to taste and texture, of course, your nutritional profile, clean label, and sustainability credentials also stay important. Um, but it's getting a quite competitive field, and I think that's also nice for the consumers because producers are really rushing to deliver the quality that they are expecting now.
Mhm. We've talked about taste and texture, and there's price, obviously, as well as health and sustainability. Are we seeing any new drivers coming into play for consumers in terms of
Uh,
motivations?
yeah, I think, of course, health, sustainability are always very important when looking at plant-based. I think around one third of the consumers we see are still looking at sustainability as one of the important drivers when looking for a plant-based alternative. But in general, sustainability also gets accompanied with being natural and looking into animal welfare. And of course, like I said before, taste and texture is coming up more and more again. And I think that really fits well in with the rising demand for proteins coming from pulses and legumes. That's something that we are really seeing. Globally, we see around 90% of the consumers thinking that pulses and legumes are a really interesting source of proteins because they get identified with being sustainably sourced, being nutritional, and having a well-balanced protein profile. So that's really nice. And together with that, we also see more and more a shift of consumers getting into the flexitarian field. So it's not really about consumers all being completely plant-based focus or only eating the animal counterparts. You have a big group in the middle now. Um, and if you can convince them with your taste and texture of your plant-based products, they are more likely to revert to the animal counterpart. So, though there is quite a bigger group that we can adhere to with our plant-based ingredients, and they are also getting more critical, I would say.
Mhm. Now, I often hear that taste, texture, and price, they're the big three when it comes to consumer expectations. From your perspective, are we getting closer to delivering on all three, or is there still a gap?
Um, I think there's of course still a gap. Plant-based industry still has a big main challenge of delivering the same taste and textures like the animal proteins. And there's certainly a gap because in the end, plant proteins and animal proteins on a biochemical level are quite different. But the good news is there is quite a lot of technical advancements, a lot of expertise in this field. So there's a lot of advancements are being made in the recent years. But what I can say is that the holy grail has certainly not been found yet with regards to plant proteins. But at BENEO, together with Meatless, the company that we acquired, we are really working hard to close the gap with its taste, texture, and price issue.
Mhm. And those evolving consumer demands, they also shape where the biggest commercial wins might come from. So let's talk now about the categories and applications that are showing the most promise. From Beneo's perspective, where do you see the biggest market opportunities for plant-based protein today?
Yeah, at BENEO, the nice thing about the plant-based protein space is that plant-based proteins can be used in a lot of different applications, and there is a potential across a lot of categories, I would say. But the biggest ones by far, I think, for now are certainly baked goods. I think baked goods, if we look at a plant-based protein perspective, have the biggest prospective growth. And then they are actually followed up by, on one hand, dairy and dairy alternative. Certainly looking out for dairy alternatives, specifically the plant-based yogurt market is getting a lot of traction. And then thirdly, of course, the meat and fish alternatives, which we are also trying to adhere to with our meatless company. So I would say these three are by far the biggest.
Yeah. You mentioned dairy alternatives there. Are there any other categories, such as snacks, for instance, where innovation is really starting to pay off?
Yeah, certainly. I think when looking at snacks specifically, we are looking at protein enrichment. Protein enrichment in all kinds of various snacks is certainly a big focus as well. The nice thing about this protein enrichment is that there is a nice combination of all kinds of different plant proteins to achieve actually a nice amino acid profile. And when looking at snacks, we are looking at protein bars, we are looking at cookies. It's quite a big list, and there's a lot of innovation happening. But certainly not only on the snack side. I think hybrid dairies, for example, also, I think that we are finding a lot of innovation where we are actually combining the best of both worlds together. And we are combining the taste and texture and nutritional benefits from real dairy, and we are combining it with the health advantages and sustainability of plant-based ingredients. So that's also certainly a promising field, and a lot of acceptance is also coming from the consumer side on that regard.
Mhm. And what role does functionality play in unlocking new applications? Are you able to give us an example of where a technical breakthrough helped open up a new product format?
And when developing a plant-based protein, functionality is always key because in the end, usually in the plant-based field, you're trying to replace some kind of animal protein with a plant-based counterpart. So the first thing that we always do at BENEO and our BENEO Technology Center is really identify your ingredient. And for Fabian specifically, or Fabian protein concentrate, we looked at what are the key functionalities that stand out compared to other plant-based proteins. And what we really saw is that our emulsification and for our Fabian protein concentrate is quite well compared to these other plant proteins. And emulsifying properties are, for example, very important when you try to replace eggs, because eggs bring a lot of emulsification into the end product. So that's really a focus that we did with our Fabian ingredients, and we developed a lot of nice applications with it, looking at an egg-free meringue, a shortbread biscuit, for example, where we are replacing the eggs. And the nice thing with the functionalities that we found with our fava bean ingredients, also some thickening, binding properties, together with the emulsifying properties, you can actually replace whole eggs, egg yolks, and egg whites. So it's very flexible as a egg replacer, and that's certainly a functionality that we are pushing forward.
Mhm. Well, let's dive into what makes fava such an exciting option for formulators. BENEO has done a lot of work with the for fava beans. So what makes it such a promising ingredient?
On one hand, fava bean the crop in general, so fava beans have quite a high protein content. So we are talking about around 30% of protein. So that makes it, of course, an excellent candidate to extract proteins from in your factory. It's also very versatile, like I already mentioned, with some nice functionalities that can focus on replacing animal proteins. And if you look at the global market in general, you clearly see that there is quite a nice growth and focus on products containing fava bean. Every year we see more and more products being launched in the baking side, dairy side, and meat and fish alternatives that contain fava bean. So also other producers are really identifying fava bean as a promising ingredient due to its functionalities. So again, some nice functionalities combined to the high protein content and some clean label credentials that you can add to your product. So in the end, fava bean is quite interesting. We also see on the amino acid profile when looking at proteins that fava bean have quite an excellent essential amino acid profile. So certainly if you are going to combine it with certain cereal proteins like wheat or rice, you can actually achieve a complete amino acid profile, which also enables you to have some protein claims on the label. So it's quite an interesting product with a lot of potential, yes.
Yeah. And how does it perform, sorry, in terms of nutrition, functionality or sustainability when compared to more established sources such as, I don't know, soy or pea?
Yeah. Always very important when talking about a comparison between plant proteins is to also consider the type of protein ingredient. So you have protein concentrates on one hand and protein isolates on the other hand. At BENEO specifically, we chose for a process called dry fractionation, which is actually a very simple process where we take in the beans, we mill them, and through actually a process called wind shifting, we separate the protein fraction from the starch fraction. And that way we can achieve a protein concentrate. And the good benefit about this process is that it actually doesn't require any water or any heating step, making it quite a carbon neutral process. A lot of the proteins on the market are actually coming from a wet process where water and chemicals are being combined together with heating to have better separation from the protein starch fraction. And you actually can achieve a protein isolate, which usually has higher protein content above 80%. Though concentrate have lower protein content, they have the benefit or the sustainability benefits, of course, with a low carbon footprint. And as well, they, of course, retain more natural ingredients like fiber, starches, and micronutrients. So in that regard, there's already a big difference between our fava bean concentrate and the more established protein isolates on the market. And we also see that though being a concentrate, we still can deliver excellent functionality and even more neutral taste than, for example, pea protein isolates. And that's really a nice focus for BENEO at the moment when comparing our fava bean concentrate to the competition.
Are there any challenges that formulators should be aware of with fava bean? I mean, how do you help address those challenges?
Oh, yeah, of course, it's not really an easy way to start replacing animal proteins with plant proteins. There's quite some expertise that is needed. And at BENEO, we really offer help at all stages of development. So even early recipe development, we can help customers with. We can also help customers with improving the taste and texture of their end product. And at BENEO, we don't only do science-based nutritional help, and we also can help on the legislation side of things, because, for example, certain customers, they want to do a protein claim on their label. And of course, there are some requirements that you need to meet to be able to do this. At BENEO, we actually have expertise on all kinds of the fields. So talking about nutrition, talking about legislation, and we can really support the customer in developing the appealing recipes that they want to actually achieve the needs of their consumers.
Mm-hmm. Now, the plant-based category is still evolving, but it's evolving rapidly with new crops, technologies, and market forces shaping what's next. Looking ahead, Frédéric, what excites you most about the future of plant-based protein?
What truly captures my interest, I would say, for the time being, is really the hybrid industry. As you can see, I already talked a bit of it in the previous questions, but we really see that there's more and more acceptance of a plant-based field at consumers. So there's a steady shift from supermarkets as well, also food manufacturers, to increasingly embrace plant-based trends. And one of the big things on this is actually the hybrid concepts, which are gaining real momentum, where we again are replacing only a part of the animal counterparts with a plant-based counterpart. And a good example I always use for this is, for example, meatloaf. which is actually a classic hybrid recipe that a lot of people don't know, because meatloaf is actually a combination of bread with meat, and they use bread actually to increase the structure, improve the structure, and actually make the end product better than the original. That's the idea of meatloaf, and I think that's also the way we need to look for other hybrid concepts. It's not always about replacing animal proteins with plant proteins to improve sustainability, to improve nutritional aspects. You also want to improve your end product on a texture and taste point of view. And this can be done by replacing a part of it. And I think that's a nice developing that we are seeing, where a lot of familiar yet modern hybrid products will be on the shelves, where plant proteins are used to improve the end product, to give a better end product, better taste, better texture, without only trying to sheep out the animal proteins.
And we're already seeing that with some major retailers in Europe, such as Aldi, Lidl, and Albert Heijn, I think, in the Netherlands. Frédéric, do you see any emerging crops or processing technologies that could reshape the space?
Yeah. I think in the end, novel crops like faba bean, lupin, mung bean are already getting a lot of focus, and they are certainly expanding the plant-based toolkit. But I think most of the innovation that is happening for now is really on the technology side, where you are even enhancing your ingredients with processes like fermentation and biotransformation. By fermenting your crops or even your ingredients, you can actually improve quality, improve functionality, and increase the appeal of your plant ingredients and plant proteins. For example, there has been done some studies that fermentation can help improve digestibility in your protein quality, and it can even enhance flavor and reduce off notes. So I think further processing of these ingredients with these fermentation and biotransformation technologies is really the way forward.
And how do you think regulatory or supply chain developments might influence what comes next?
From a regulatory point of view, I think a good thing is that we see that the rules are becoming more strict and better defined. Talking about labeling, talking about nutritional claims, talking about clean and natural products. So that's certainly something that is happening, where producers are being pushed to be more transparent, having customer-centric labeling, and showing that customers can easily grasp what is in the product. And also vegan labeling, for example, for products will not be as easy because for now we sometimes see that products where animal testing has been done can still fade away with some vegan labeling. That's certainly something that will go away in the future. And also looking at allergen claims and protein claims, they are also getting more strict. So I think there will be more transparency for the consumers, and that's certainly a good thing. On the supply chain of things, I think price volatility with meat, fish, and eggs, so the animal counterpart, is certainly something that's beneficial for the plant proteins. For example, what we recently saw in the USA is the egg scarcity or the eggflation. And actually, plant proteins can offer an excellent price stabilization for this regard due to the supply security that plant proteins can bring. They can actually ensure that producers, even if they only replace parts of their eggs, can actually have a price stabilization and supply security for the end product. So that's also certainly something to look forward for.
Before we wrap up, if you had one piece of advice for a startup or brand looking to develop a new plant-based product today, what would it be?
Yeah. I think the summary is that plant-based is not sufficient anymore. Before, you could really market your product with putting it forward as a plant-based alternative. Like I said, being plant-based only is not sufficient anymore, certainly for this big flexitarian group that we see in the market. So we really need to have consumer-centric innovation with clear nutritional value that you bring in your end product. So really think about, what does the consumer need? Do they want a high protein content, for example? Do they want a certain taste, a certain texture? And then from that point of view, start looking which plant ingredient, which plant proteins you can incorporate into your end recipe to achieve this need of the consumer. Because being plant-based only won't be sufficient anymore, and you really want to improve your end recipe compared to the original one. And if you are doing this, I think you are well set to be very competitive in this new market space.
Look, Frédéric, thank you very much for sharing your insights and experience with us today. It's been a pleasure hearing your perspectives on where plant-based proteins are headed and the role that BENEO is playing in shaping its future. Hopefully we'll catch up very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. It was very nice to be able to talk about this, and thank you for this opportunity.
It's great. See you soon.